have a great honor. We have the honor of witnessing in some ways an act of returning. We on the Shabbat of returning. We have with us as our teacher on the Shabbat, Rabbi Sharon Sobel, who is the former director of the CCRJ, and most famously, and I'll say this because earlier, as we were getting ready for the service, Sharon was telling stories of the people who had various aliyot, were reading Torah about their kids hiding behind legs in the middle of Tat Shabbats, and a really beloved former rabbi of our congregation, who was with us from 1989 to 1995, but really has never left. So I'm not sure even it can be called a returning if you've been with us so many times. And we're so honored to have you with us this Shabbat as our teacher.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Helfman. And thank you so much, Rabbi Splansky, for the warm and gracious invitation to address the congregation this morning on Shabbat Shuvah. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shana Tova. I think many of us were surprised on Erev Rosh Hashanah to learn of the death of United States Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And as a dual US Canadian citizen, I admired both Justice Ginsburg and current Canadian Supreme Court Justice Rosalie Abella, who both not only fulfilled the biblical mitzvah of tzedek tirdof, justice pursue, but both also realize that to be fully human is to strive for the humanity and the dignity of other human beings. This past Wednesday, we heard this about Justice Ginsburg from Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt with her words of tribute in the brief memorial service as RBG lay in repose at the US Supreme Court. And she said, to be born into a world that does not see you, that does not believe in your potential, that does not give you a path for opportunity, and despite this, to be able to see beyond the world you are in, to imagine that something can be different, that is the job of a prophet. and it is the rare prophet who not only imagines a new world, but also makes that new world a reality. That was such an extremely moving ceremony on Wednesday. And similarly, Justice Abella has been described by her peers as a jurist who respects the rule of law and at the same time understands that the purpose of the rule of law is to facilitate human flourishing. Now, I'm not going to elaborate on all of that exactly because Rabbi Splansky wrote so beautifully about RBG yesterday in her rabbinic reflection for life at HBT online. But there are three small words that Rabbi Holtzblatt used to describe Ruth Bader Ginsburg that have also been used about Rosalie Abella. And these are the words that I want to focus on this morning. Rabbi Holtzblatt said of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was kind, she was loving, she was deeply caring. Kind, loving, and caring. And we can use one Hebrew word to sum up these three traits, the word hesed. Both RBG and Rosalie Abella are people filled with hesed. And it is this Jewish value of hesed that imbued their work of pursuing justice. During these days of awe, these Yamim Noraim, this notion of chesed permeates our liturgy, our biblical texts, and the very spirit and nature of these holy days. So we're going to examine a few examples this morning. Beginning with Slichot prior to Rosh Hashanah, we start referring to God as Avinu Malkeinu, our sovereign, our parent. We know at this time, or we describe God at this time, as God serving as a judge, judging our actions, weighing our behavior on a scale, looking at our deeds. We say that we do one good deed and the balance of our life is weighed to the good, or if we do one bad deed and the balance of our life is tipped to the bad. That is God as Malkeinu. Yet we hope at the same time that God will judge us or view us with chesed, with great love and compassion and rachamim, mercy, and that the attribute of Malkeinu, of sovereignty or of judgment will be tempered with abounding love. So if God is a loving parent and we are manifest, we are God's partners in this world, we also have that ability to behave like God. We have that ability to judge others with compassion. We have that ability to behave with chesed as well. And we have that ability to forgive others as we hope that God will forgive us. So how can we manifest chesed in the world we are living in the way that we hope that the Holy One will bestow chesed upon us? My friends, we are living in an era where people have forgotten sometimes how to live with chesed in their hearts, how to be kind, where the art of civil discourse has been lost, where social media is filled with vitriol and venom, and where sometimes hatred and enmity seem to prevail. We know that this has been a difficult summer, a difficult 6 months. Tempers are running short due to the pandemic. People are weary. We're anxious. We're worried. Earlier, Rabbi Splansky referred to praying for parnasa tova. People are worried about their parnasa, their income. We're worried about survival. Where I live right now in the United States, the rhetoric of the election campaigns can seem unbelievably painful. And in the United States and in Israel, politics is hyper-partisan. It's difficult to have a civil conversation about politics. It's difficult to have a civil conversation in Israel and the United States about COVID, because COVID has become politicized, highly politicized, when it should be a health issue. We're witnessing racism and xenophobia and anti-Semitism. That's on the rise. Ruth Bader Ginsburg taught by example how our world is much richer when we each don't have the same opinion. It's not necessary for everyone to believe the same thing, but when we disagree, we need to do so respectfully. Her dissenting opinions were eloquent, articulate, and passionate. One of her dearest friends on the Supreme Court was Justice Antonin Scalia, with whom she often disagreed, and they modeled how to respectfully agree to disagree. And in fact, Jewish tradition values and celebrates diversity of opinion. We learn in the Talmud about two very learned schools of Jewish teaching, the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. The house of Shammai would insist that Jewish practice abide by very stringent, strict guidelines. The house of Hillel's teachings were more lenient. Once, students from both schools got into a heated argument over whose teachings truly reflected God's will, over whose teachings were most authentically Jewish. And in the midst of a discussion, a heavenly voice cried out, "Stop! Both teachings are the words of the living God. All the words were given to us by one God who created them. Blessed be God. God has spoken everything that you are talking about." So our capacity to disagree is holy, and we are strong enough as a people to have rigorous debate. Healthy public discourse is a sign of strength and not weakness. And we see in the Talmud that the Talmud is never scandalized by disagreement. Rather, the rabbis see it as a chance to understand the legal issues more deeply, to find a way to achieve harmony and consensus despite differing opinions. Theologian and philosopher Albert Schweitzer once said, constant kindness, constant hesed, can accomplish much. As the sun makes ice melt, kindness causes misunderstanding, mistrust, and hostility to evaporate. So let's examine a few other examples. We see the notion of hesed reflected in our biblical texts during this sacred time of the year as well. This morning on Shabbat Shuvah, not only do we read from the prophet Joel, we also read from Hosea chapter 14. But I want to go backwards in Hosea to chapter 6, because Hosea reminds the Israelites of this. Hosea says, Ki chesed chafatzti v'lo zevach. It is love I desire and not sacrifice. Hosea tells us it is all nice and fine to offer sacrifices, which at that time was how the Israelites prayed. But if you are not offering God your love, if you are not treating your neighbors kindly, your sacrifice, your prayers will be meaningless. And as we look ahead to the Haftarah portion for Yom Kippur morning from the book of Isaiah, Isaiah repeats that message using very clear language. Isaiah says, your fasting is meaningless unless you show love, compassion, and kindness to your fellow human being by feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and freeing the captive. You can pray all you want, you can afflict your souls, but unless we try to figure out how to bring more hesed, more kindness into our lives and the lives of those around us, like RBG, like Rosalia Bella, all of our prayers, all of our fasting, all of our deep introspection will be meaningless unless it's turned into loving action. And in fact, chesed is mentioned in the Torah over 190 times. Yep, 190 times. The frequency of its appearance gives it primacy as one of the most important Jewish ethical values. Modern scholar Aviva Zornberg teaches us that chesed is not simply loving kindness. Rather, it goes beyond that to embrace the values of courage and imagination. So if my views diverge from yours, how can I go out of my way to find a path to live in peace and harmony with you, to live in friendship and solidarity? See, the dog is agreeing with me on this. I don't know if you can hear Messi barking in the background. He wants to emphasize that. Messi wants to emphasize that we need to find a way, that I need to find a way to treat you with the dignity and respect that you deserve, even if I don't agree with you. That chesed means trying to understand that I need to figure out what gives you pain and how to mitigate that pain. And in this amazing community of Holy Blossom, we have an example of that great act of chesed when a few years ago, Holy Blossom initiated the circles of peace when you reached out to the mosques after the Quebec City mosque shooting a few years ago, and you encircled the mosques with a circle of love. That was trying to figure out what caused others pain and how to offer chesed, loving kindness, how to reach out arms and hearts at a time of deep pain. And then the Muslim community came back at a time that the Jewish community was feeling pain. And that began a program of interfaith dialogue that has continued to this day, helping the Muslim and Jewish communities in the GTA learn more about each other and understand more about each other. and to continue those acts of hesed and to figure out what the challenges and the joys are that lift each other up. This is an example of what our tradition calls courageous and compassionate action when we see or hear injustice or cruelty. So peace and understanding are secured by our ears, listening sensitively and sincerely to the people around us. To speak out is making the word chesed come alive in its full sense of its meaning, showing loving kindness to others with courage and imagination, helping to make our world become a more loving and just place for all who dwell there. So chesed counts. Kindness and love count in our words and actions, large and small. You may have heard of my dear friend Kim Smiley, and you might see her name in large letters because she's opening up a shop on the corner of Eglinton and Old Park, and it's opening up in October. And she decided to do something personal to bring chesed to a larger global population. Kim had over a decade of leadership experience in the nonprofit sector, where she focused on enriching the lives of those in need. And she finally decided to use her artistic and entrepreneurial expertise to assist the vulnerable. So she started a jewelry company with a social mission. Kim believes in beauty for the public good. She created employment opportunities for marginalized populations, specifically Syrian refugees, harnessing the power of fashion to empower women in need with training, work experience, and a living wage. And next, she created the empathy effect. It began as a humble social experiment and snowballed into a social movement. The overarching goal of the empathy effect was to serve as a platform to share stories of extraordinary people in the world. Because sometimes we all get a little cynical. We become immune to other people's suffering. And the project reawakened in people to something that is already within us. She wanted to show empathy on a global scale and not just through a local lens, she said. And both of these projects were born of Kim's deep understanding of the role of chesed in our lives as Jews. And I hope you'll go and visit her shop when it opens, because Kim is a remarkable human being. There are so many people engaged in works of chesed and acts of love and kindness on a regular basis. And I know that Holy Blossom and many of you do this on both a large and small scale in your homes, in the GTA community, and on a larger global scale, and some do it quietly without fanfare, others as part of a larger group. Because together, we can make our world a kinder, more compassionate place, a place where chesed prevails. So I began with Rabbi Holtzblatt's words of tribute about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I'm going to end with a direct quote from Rosalie Abella, when she was describing her time on the bench as a family court judge. She said, "This was the hardest job I ever had, and where I learned how to listen. Every job I've had since started with my understanding of the world through the eyes of these people who expected fairness, courage, and open mind, someone who listened and someone who was decisive, who listened through the lens, these are my words now, who listened through the lens of tzedek, justice, and chesed, who listened with compassion for the humanity of every person's dignity and sense of their being created b'tselem Elohim." So it is my hope for this new year, my dream, that no matter what we face during this coming year, that we can all face the vicissitudes of life with strength, resilience, courage, and hope, with cheseds in our heart. And I want to close with this prayer from the Reform Movement's Siddur Mishkan Tefillah. O God, may we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding, loved each of us with great chesed for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds of loving kindness exceed our speech. And may we never lift our hand but to conquer fear and doubts and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. Shana Tova, Gamar Chatima Tova.
Today, I